The power of thinking big. What if I told you that the size of your goals literally rewires your brain's neural architecture, and that people who think small activate completely different brain networks than those who think big? Not motivational mythology. Actual documented neuroscience showing that ambitious thinking changes brain structure. This isn't positive thinking nonsense. This is hard neurobiology. Researchers studying goal setting and neuroplasticity have discovered something extraordinary. When you set large, challenging goals, your brain activates its prefrontal cortex and nucleus accumbens in patterns that trigger dopamine release, neurogenesis, and enhance cognitive flexibility. Small, safe goals literally don't generate enough neural activation to drive meaningful brain changes or behavioral transformation. Here's what they don't teach you. Your brain's reticular activating system, the filter determining what information reaches conscious awareness, expands or contracts based on the scope of your thinking. Think small, and you'll only notice small opportunities. Think big, and your perceptual field widens to detect possibilities that were always there, but previously invisible. Ancient wisdom traditions spoke of the power of vision and expansive thinking. Modern neuroscience has revealed the exact biological mechanisms: enhanced neural connectivity, increased dopamine signaling, expanded attention networks, and accelerated neuroplasticity. I'm about to reveal 10 specific protocols that exploit your brain's response to ambitious thinking. Techniques that literally restructure your neural architecture to support bigger action, broader perception, and exponential rather than linear growth. Your brain is waiting for permission to expand. Time to give it. Body. The 10 Techniquest. Part 1. Cognitive Horizon Expansion Protocol. Most people set goals based on what feels achievable given their current resources and capabilities. This is neurologically backwards. Your brain doesn't expand to meet small goals, it contracts to match them. Neuroscientists studying goal magnitude have discovered that challenging goals activate your prefrontal cortex's executive networks more intensely than easy goals. This activation triggers BDNF release, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which literally grows new neurons and strengthens synaptic connections. Your brain physically restructures itself in response to cognitive challenge. This is technique number 1 out of 10, the Cognitive Horizon Expansion Protocol. Here's your exact practice for the next 7 days. Every morning, spend 10 minutes writing goals that are exactly 10 times larger than what currently feels realistic. If you think you can earn $100,000, write $1 million. If you think you can reach 1,000 people, write 10,000. Don't worry about how. Focus entirely on expanding the target. Make this feel absurd initially. That discomfort signals you're crossing your brain's current possibility threshold. The mechanism triggers neuroplastic potential. When you contemplate goals beyond your current capability blueprint, your prefrontal cortex begins generating novel neural pathways to bridge the gap between current state and desired state. You're forcing your brain to think in new patterns rather than optimizing existing ones. Start setting 10x goals daily and watch your brain's problem-solving creativity explode as it searches for nonlinear solutions. Part 2. Reticular Activation Recalibration Method. Your brain filters out 99% of sensory information as irrelevant. What determines relevance? Your goals. Set a small goal. At your reticular activating system, your brain's attention filter only highlights small opportunities. Set a massive goal, and it suddenly starts spotting resources, connections, and possibilities it previously ignored. Research on selective attention reveals that your RAS functions like a search algorithm, prioritizing information matching your stated objectives. When you think big, you literally reprogram what your brain considers worthy of conscious attention. You're not creating new opportunities, you're finally noticing the ones that were always present. This is technique number 2 out of 10, the Reticular Activation Recalibration Method. Execute this protocol. Choose one audacious goal, something that genuinely scares you with its magnitude. For 21 consecutive days, write it down first thing in the morning and last thing before sleep. Use identical language each time. This repetition signals your RAS that this goal is priority level important, worthy of filtering reality to highlight relevant information. Why this works: repetition strengthens neural pathways between your goal representation and your attention networks. Your thalamus, which gates sensory input, begins allowing through information tagged as relevant to your big goal, while continuing to filter information related only to smaller ambitions. You're essentially upgrading your perceptual operating system. Start programming your RAS with Ambitious targets and watch opportunity. Recognition increase exponentially without external circumstances changing at all. Part 3. Dopaminergic. Motivation amplification technique. Quasmo goals generate weak dopamine responses. Your ventral tegmental area, your brain's dopamine factory, evolved to reward behavior supporting survival and reproduction. In modern contexts, it responds most powerfully to novelty, challenge, and the prospect of significant reward. Neuroscientists studying motivation have found that anticipated reward magnitude directly correlates with dopamine release intensity. Bigger potential rewards trigger larger dopamine spikes, which enhance motivation, focus, and persistence. You're literally more motivated by ambitious goals because they activate your brain's reward systems more powerfully. This is technique number 3 out of 10, the dopaminergic motivation amplification technique. Your intervention is specific. Each week for 8 weeks, identify one area where you're pursuing incremental improvement. Completely reimagine it as transformational change instead. Don't try to lose 5 pounds. Envision complete physical transformation. Don't aim for 10% revenue growth. Architect market dominance. Write detailed descriptions of the transformed end state. Engaging all senses to make it neurologically vivid. The mechanism leverages anticipatory dopamine. When you vividly imagine significant rewards, your nucleus accumbens and ventral tegmental area release dopamine, as if you're already approaching the reward. This dopamine enhances cognitive function, increases willingness to work, and suppresses the perception of effort. You're hacking your motivation system by increasing the neurological payoff. Start amplifying your goal magnitude dramatically and watch motivation that felt force become spontaneous and powerful. Part 4. Constraint dissolution framework. You think resource constraints determine what's possible. They don't. They determine what's easy. Every major innovation in history required operating beyond apparent resource limits. Your brain's problem-solving capacity activates most powerfully when constraints are ignored rather than respected. Research on creative problem-solving shows that artificial constraints trigger your brain's default analytical networks, which optimize within boundaries. Removing constraints activates your imagination networks, primarily right hemisphere, which generate novel, boundary-breaking solutions. You literally think more creatively when you ignore limitations. This is technique number 4 out of 10, the constraint dissolution framework. Here's your practice for 30 days. When planning any project or goal, complete the separate planning sessions. Session 1. Plan with all current constraints. Acknowledge time, money, skills, connections. Session 2. Plan as if you had unlimited resources. Document both plans, then systematically ask, how can I achieve 80% of the unlimited plan with creative use of current resources? Why this works, you're training your prefrontal cortex to generate ambitious solutions first, then retrofit them to reality, rather than letting reality determine your solutions from the start. This sequence produces dramatically more innovative approaches. You're essentially forcing your brain to think big before thinking practically. Start planning without constraints first and watch previously impossible goals become creatively achievable through non-obvious pathways. Part 5. Social proof resistance protocol. You unconsciously calibrate your goals to match your peer group's achievements. This social benchmarking keeps you within your tribe's normal distribution. Your brain's social comparison circuitry involving your medial prefrontal cortex creates comfort within group norms and anxiety when deviating upward. Neuroscientists studying social comparison have discovered that your brain processes social status hierarchies automatically, generating stress responses when you attempt to rise above your reference group. This isn't humility, it's neurological conditioning that keeps you playing small to maintain social belonging. This is technique number 5 out of 10, the social proof resistance protocol. Execute this sequence. Identify 3 people operating at a level you consider extraordinary, people whose achievements feel intimidating or unrealistic for you. For 45 days, spend 20 minutes daily consuming their content, studying their thinking, and immersing yourself in their reality. Your goal is an imitation, it's recalibration of what your brain considers normal achievement. The mechanism rewires social comparison circuits. Repeated exposure to extraordinary achievement desensitizes your amygdala's threat response to ambition beyond your current peer group. Your medial prefrontal cortex begins incorporating higher-performing individuals into your reference group, which raises your unconscious achievement baseline. You're essentially upgrading your mental peer group. Start surrounding yourself with extraordinary achievement digitally and watch your internal possibility. Ceiling rise automatically. Part 6. Temporal extension visioning system. You think in quarters and years because that's what society conditions. Your brain's default planning horizon is catastrophically short-shaped by immediate survival needs that no longer apply. Extended temporal thinking activates different neural networks entirely. Research on perspection mental time travel reveals that thinking on decade-long timescales activates your hippocampus and medial temporal lobes differently than short-term planning. Long-term visioning reduces the psychological weight of short-term obstacles while clarifying which actions actually matter. You literally see different paths when your time horizon extends. This is technique number 6 out of 10. The temporal extension visioning system. Your protocol is this. Monthly for 1 year. Dedicate 30 minutes to 10-year visioning. Write a detailed description of your life exactly 10 years from today, not hopes or wishes, but a concrete description as if it's already true. Include specific numbers, relationships, capabilities, and achievements. Make it uncomfortably ambitious. Update this vision monthly as your conception of possibility expands. Why this works: extended temporal projection activates your brain's simulation networks. Your default mode network active during mind wandering. At future thinking begins treating the 10-year vision as a real future to navigate toward, rather than fantasy to dismiss. Current obstacles shrink in significance when evaluated against decade-long TRAJECTORIES. Start thinking in decades rather than years and watch short-term limitations lose their power while long-term strategy becomes clear. Part 7. Identity expansion integration method. You won't pursue goals that conflict with your self-concept. If you see yourself as not a leader, you'll sabotage leadership opportunities. If you identify as bad with money, you'll unconsciously maintain that reality. Your medial prefrontal cortex, which maintains self-concept, acts as a thermostat, keeping behavior aligned with identity. Neuroscientists studying self-concept have found that identity operates as a constraint on action. Before your behavior permanently changes, your self-concept must expand to accommodate the new behavior. Otherwise, your brain experiences cognitive dissonance and reverts to identity-consistent patterns. This is technique number 7 out of 10, the identity expansion integration method. Here's your intervention for 60 days. Practice acting as if for 1 hour daily. Choose an identity aligned with your big goals: innovative problem solver, influential communicator, strategic thinker. During this hour, make every decision by asking, what would identity do here? Don't try to become this person. Practice inhabiting the identity temporarily, and notice how your choices shift. The mechanism gradually rewrites self-concept. Each time you successfully operate from an expanded identity, you're creating episodic memories that feed into your medial prefrontal cortex's self-model. Over time, the practice identity integrates into your baseline self-concept. You're essentially trying on bigger identities until your brain accepts them as true. Start practicing expanded identities in contained time frames and watch your self-concept grow to match your ambitions. Part 8. Failure reframe. The sensitization protocol. You think small because you're terrified of visible failure. Big goals mean big potential embarrassment. Your amygdala, your threat detection system, treats social judgment as survival level danger, which makes ambitious action feel genuinely dangerous. Research on fear extinction shows that repeated exposure to feared outcomes in safe contexts rewires your amygdala's threat associations. When you deliberately expose yourself to small failures without catastrophic consequences, your brain learns that failure isn't actually dangerous. This desensitization is the only way to override fear-based goal setting. This is technique number 8 out of 10, the failure reframe desensitization protocol. Execute this practice for 90 days. Deliberately engineer one small, public failure weekly. Share an idea that might get criticized. Attempt something you'll probably fail at initially. Post work before it's perfect. The failure must be real, actually trying and missing, not fake vulnerability. Document each failure and the actual consequences, which will be dramatically less severe than predicted. Why this works: each non-catastrophic failure weakens the neural pathways connecting failure to threat. Your amygdala's fear response gradually extinguishes through exposure without negative reinforcement. Your prefrontal cortex develops accurate risk assessment rather than catastrophic prediction. You're building failure immunity through controlled exposure. Start failing strategically and frequently, and watch your capacity for ambitious action expand as Failure loses its paralyzing power. Part 9. Resource accumulation acceleration system. Most people think linearly, work hard, accumulate resources slowly, eventually afford bigger goals. This timeline assumes resources are the limiting factor. They're not. Your belief about resource acquisition speed is. Your brain will only notice and pursue resource opportunities, matching your expected accumulation rate. Neuroscientists studying expectation and perception have found that your brain's predictive processing shapes what opportunities you notice. Expect slow accumulation and you'll only see gradual paths. Expect exponential accumulation, and your attention networks will highlight leverage points, asymmetric opportunities, and nonlinear growth mechanisms. This is technique number 9 out of 10, the resource accumulation acceleration system. Your protocol is radical. Choose one resource you need: money, skills, connections, time, attention. Research 3 examples of people who accumulated that resource 10 times faster than normal timelines. Study their strategies in detail. Then ask, what would need to be true for me to match their acceleration? Write specific hypotheses about mindset, strategy, and actions that enabled their speed. The mechanism shifts expectation baselines. By studying extreme examples, you're exposing your brain to evidence that rapid accumulation is possible, which weakens your unconscious assumption that slow is inevitable. Your RAS begins filtering for acceleration strategies rather than steady-state approaches. Start studying exponential examples systematically and watch your resource accumulation rate increase as you notice leverage opportunities. Part 10. Collaborative magnitude multiplication method. You are solving problems alone that could be solved collaboratively with 1x less effort and 1x bigger results. Your brain defaults to individual action because collaborative thinking requires theory of mind modeling other people's capabilities, motivations, and potential contributions. This is metabolically expensive, so your brain avoids it. Research on collective intelligence reveals that properly structured collaboration produces outcomes exceeding the sum of individual capabilities. But most people think collaborative only after exhausting individual options, which means they never access collaborative leverage for their biggest goals. This is technique number 10 out of 10. The collaborative magnitude multiplication method. Execute the sequence for each major goal. Before planning solo execution, spend 45 minutes brainstorming collaborative possibilities. Ask, who could achieve this goal effortlessly with their existing resources? Who would benefit from achieving this alongside me? Whose complementary skills would make this 1x easier? Document 10 potential collaborators even if you don't know them yet. Why this works: you're forcing your prefrontal cortex to evaluate collaborative pathways before defaulting to solo struggle. This activates your social cognition networks, including your temporoparietal junction, which generates dramatically different solution spaces. You're hacking your brain's solo bias by making collaboration the first consideration rather than the last. Start thinking collaboratively before thinking solo and watch impossible goals become achievable through strategic partnership. Closing these 10 protocols aren't motivational tricks, they're neurologically grounded methods for restructuring how your brain processes ambition, possibility, and achievement. Cognitive expansion, attention recalibration, dopamine optimization, constraint dissolution, social proof resistance, temporal extension, identity expansion, failure desensitization, resource acceleration, collaborative multiplication. Together, they form a comprehensive system for exploiting your brain's natural response to ambitious thinking. Ancient wisdom traditions spoke of the power of vision and bold aspiration. Modern neuroscience has revealed the exact mechanisms. These aren't metaphors. They're descriptions of actual neural processes that activate when you think beyond your current constraints. Science has proven what high achievers always knew. Your brain literally reorganizes itself in response to the magnitude of your thinking. Small goals trigger small neural responses. Big goals activate growth mechanisms, expand attention networks, and drive neuroplastic changes that make bigger action possible. Your transformation doesn't start tomorrow or next week. It starts the moment you set a goal that genuinely scares you with its magnitude. The moment your brain encounters a challenge beyond its current processing capacity and begins building new neural architecture to bridge the gap.